actually, at some point, I want to play this clip I have of a rabbi that is trying to address quote unquote white supremacy with their own text that supposedly their actual thousands of year old textbook addresses white supremacy, which to me, I find that to be kind of bizarre. And then there's also something about Muslims in there towards the end. So let me go ahead and see if I can play it for you.
In America today, we have white supremacy.
Audio good?
In the Torah, we had Amalek. Amalek is seen as the eternal enemy of our people, whose members found strength by making us suffer. Therefore, when the Lord your God grants you safety from all your enemies around you, and the land that the Lord your God is giving to you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. Our rabbinic sages parse these sentences and derive two distinct meanings. Blotting out the memory of Amalek is a military command, literally to destroy Amalek. Now, facing today's Amalek, we are reminded that the Torah calls us not just to escape, but to extirpate Amalek. We are commanded to do real and literal battle against it. That means coming off the bench in the fight against white supremacy. It means putting our reputations and our money and our physical bodies on the line. But also so that we are ready to answer people with radically destructive and incoherent versions of history. So that we can counter white supremacists. So that we can counter Amalek and blot them out by retaining on our lips and in our records their history. By being bearers of history, we can help guide the future. Blotting out Amalek need not merely be about military conquest. Equally important is ideological victory. And nothing could more readily counter white supremacy than a Jewish community proudly helping our Muslim neighbors. There is nothing that undermines a white supremacist worldview more than diverse communities getting along and building together towards the future.
Build back better.
Build back better. That's exactly it. See, this bothers me on so many levels because these same people, and I think they have their own type of supremacy, right?
They have the only codified book of supremacy in existence called the Talmud, which is a rabbinical exegesis on the Torah, which continuously talks about how to oppress the goyim, i.e. the cattles, i.e. the slaves, i.e.
Everybody
non-Jews.
No, the Talmud, I've read parts of it, and it is disturbing. But let's put that on the shelf for a second. What he's doing here, especially the part where he's talking about let's bring together our Muslim brothers and sisters, right? Well, these are the same people that right around 9/11, for a good about 10 to 15 years, was all anti-Islam. I never heard of white supremacy being mentioned specifically around 9/11. I heard the opposite. I've heard and have seen and have witnessed, and you've witnessed, we all have, the news mainstream outlets constantly vilify Muslims and create monsters out of Islam. Everything. The word terrorism was spawned specifically after 9/11. I mean, at the time, there was a compilation clip on YouTube that would use the word terrorist 1,000 times. It was just like terrorism, Islamic terrorism, Muslims, Islam terrorism. Constantly, 9/11, 9/11, 9/11. Like, that was the COVID of that era. COVID is like a 9/11, to the second power. It's just, they took what 9/11 was, which was really
fear.
It's definitely fear.
It's
Absolutely.
a redux.
Absolutely. If you look at the links between 9/11 and COVID, 9/11 was, they milked it. First of all, they lied about it.
Well, first of all, Israel did it, and the Zionine
Mossad was absolutely involved.
Absolutely at the apex of involvement.
And the American government absolutely involved. That doesn't get addressed by any major politician. I've interviewed the only politician that's ever actually talked about it, which was Senator Mike Gravel. I haven't heard it. Cynthia McKinney, she also talked about that. And shout out to Rudy Dent, God rest his soul. He just passed a few months back. He was a firefighter that was there on 9/11, and he spoke out about all this kind of stuff. But needless to say, 9/11 was used as a pretext to take away our rights, but it was more like legal rights, more on paper. The Patriot Act 2, the NDAA, invasion of privacy, all that stuff. That happened after 9/11. COVID was an extension in where they were able to take our rights away physically, not just by law. Physically, you can't enter this establishment without your vaccine. You can't, pretty soon you can't fly. Certain governments, certain countries, you can't do anything without the vaccine. If you were in Jordan right now, you can't go to the bank. You can't do anything officially. You can't enter a public building without having your vaccine. So this was a second step. Now, just to bring it back, what he's talking about is all of a sudden these guys are interested in bringing about the Islamic faith and making them and helping the minorities per se. And that bothers me very, very much. Not because it's a nice gesture, but it's fake. It's a way to gather all the minority groups, including Muslims, and pit them against white people, supposedly the white supremacists. And if you've been paying attention to all this crap in the media, especially with January 6th and all these different lies are perpetuating, you think that they say white supremacy is the biggest danger and the biggest threat to our democracy right now. White supremacy, because there's so many white supremacists, and we're both coming from different backgrounds. We're both Muslim. I'm an immigrant.
We're both mountain people.
And I'm like, no, even though I saw, and I've always had disdain to the U.S. government for, creating creating all these wars. Israel, that country that pushed the U.S. to go through all these different wars, and this is backed by like CIA intelligence officer Dr. Michael Scheuer. He's talked about it extensively.
PNAC document, clean break document. All this stuff was laid out.
All this stuff. The Iraq war had nothing. I mean, all these different wars that Israel and their people pushed us into going into. Now, all of a sudden, they care about Muslims and they want to protect us. And this is where I like to jump and pounce on the Islamic community because they're cucked out at this point. Big cucked. And they're also, they've embraced this fakery, this fake trash.
People of the book.
They've embraced it. Because they've been vilified, right? And so they automatically and rightfully so are very much anti-Western because of everything that's happened. It was all the Western European countries, Australia, Canada, the U.S. that are constantly involved in bombing the Middle East.
French.
British for sure, involved in bombing the Middle East into the Stone Age. So Muslims have a chip on their shoulder, but now these groups are saying, oh, the Muslims, they're part of this Islamophobia. They're part of this group that's being attacked by the white supremacists. And the dumb fuck Muslims actually believe this shit. And they're going out and saying, yeah, fuck the white people. Let's, do this. Like Ilhan Omar and all these retarded people in Congress, Rashida Tlaib, so forth and so on.
Well, and the hypocrisy